Good morning, class. I'm Kyle Lundy, and today I'll be going over my immersion experience. I was able to study the Korean culture, and what's unique about my time here with this presentation and the research that I conducted is that I'm actually stationed here in Korea, so I've been able to experience a lot of these things firsthand. And with that, I'll jump right into the presentation. So here's a quick overview of what I'm going to be going over today. Just the lessons learned from the research, the historical and current oppression in Korea, a summary of the events and some of the key takeaways that I had, the interviews, including the organizational interview and the individual interview, and then I'll be talking about the quick summary of experiences at the end, as well as discussion and applications counseling. So here's some of the lessons that I learned from the research. So the first thing that I noticed as I was going through the research was the differences between the intercharacteristics and intracharacteristics of the Korean culture, or I should say the intergroups and the intragroups. So when it comes to interpersonal relationships between Korea and other cultures, it's important to note that a lot of their beliefs and what they feel about other cultures has shifted a lot over the past 100 years. And what I mean by that is Korea used to be a country that was very heavily focused on agriculture, lots of farming as well as industrial material producing. And then after, in the late 1990s, what is known as the Korean wave, the Korean culture started to spread and global awareness started to become a thing for how folks all around the world view Korean culture, understand Korean culture, fantasize about Korean culture, understand the food, the shows that are produced, things like that. So as it stands now, Korea has a very global reach. I think a lot of people are familiar with the music that they produce, a lot of the food as I mentioned, and because of this, the culture has experienced an industrial boom. They're sharing their products worldwide, and this has led to a sense of individuality and independence among Koreans. They take a lot of pride in the fact that they have these things and they've done so much as a country, which is a testament to their abilities. And so because of this, they do see themselves a little bit more above those other countries that aren't doing so well. And they like to compare themselves often with countries such as America, which are considered thriving in their viewpoint. In terms of the intragroup characteristics that they experience within their own culture, there's actually quite a few subgroups that I can't mention all of them, but a few to mention that I think are important is the military subgroup. It is a mandatory military service commitment in Korea if you're a male. It's a minimum of 2 years, but many decide to make it into a career for more than that. And so it's important that that is its own subculture within Korea. There's also the agricultural lower class. There are business tycoons, there are corporate workers, there are older, more conservative people in Korea that want to keep the culture the way it was, and there's a wave of younger generational Koreans who want to change things, and you might consider them more liberal. And so amongst these different groups, there's lots of different focuses, values, but it's just such an immense and deep and rich culture. So some of the common attitudes and beliefs and values that Koreans hold. So they're very big into honor. They really are big into respect. It's important that someone shows respect for others, that they have some sort of important thing that they're bringing to the community. It's not uncommon for even the oldest or the elderly in the community to be working. If they're idle or they're at home, that's not really seen as a good thing. So at least in my own experiences, I've witnessed elderly in the streets selling maybe something at a fruit stand or vegetables, something that's not really of immense value, but because they're working in the community, they're retaining their honor in the eyes of the community. They're contributing in some sort of way. At least that's how they view it. As I mentioned, they're very big into honor and respect. And so something I'll get into later is there is a sort of social chain amongst Koreans. It's important for them to know where they stand when they meet someone. So something that's common in Korea is asking your age as soon as you meet someone. That way, right away, before you get into politics, religion, the workforce, what have you, you already know where you might stand with another person. So going into that, some of the prominent customs and practices they have again stems back to that respect. There's lots of bowing, there's shaking hands with 2 hands. If you're giving something or taking something, you use 2 hands. When you're in public, it's important that you maintain a sense of privacy. You're not really supposed to talk to strangers and start random conversations. If you're using the public transportation system, you're supposed to be quiet. You're not even supposed to talk to someone you might know. It's just considered rude. And so Koreans, in a public sense, are very private and to themselves. In terms of spirituality and religion, about 63% of the country is considered Christian or Catholic, and about 35% are considered Buddhist. And so that's very prominent in the way that they interact with one another in terms of promoting community outreach, ensuring that people that are impoverished are taken care of. And there's also this idea of Confucianism. It's kind of a mix of a social system as well as religious. And so a lot of Koreans actually have value in their ancestors. They believe that their ancestry means something a little more than what you see here and now. Some folks even pray to their ancestors when they're in times of trouble because they believe those ties are very deeply rooted. There's also a lot of temples scattered all throughout Korea, and it's not uncommon for a tourist such as myself to just get lost in them. Anywhere you go, you can stumble across them, and they're fully dedicated. They shave their heads, they have the robes. Some people live there throughout their entire lives. So, when it comes to historical and current oppression in Korea, it's really important to know that Korea, historically, from 1910 to 1945, was actually occupied by the Japanese Empire, all the way up to the end of World War II when the Japanese were defeated and had to let go of their control over Korea. But while the Japanese were over Korea, they were known for having harsh military law. They would publicly execute people who were caught stealing food if they were hungry. They would destroy crops. They would destroy sacred sites to the Koreans. And because of that, there's a lot of animosity back then that's even stemmed into now. And although the countries are not in a direct conflict, it's evident in their politics and trade agreements that there's still some sort of pressure there, if you will. Japan has since then tried to make amends, but it's never been quite the same, and there is a level of intensity. Nowadays, what oppression looks like is mostly through people with power and authority abusing people of lower stature in their eyes. So bosses taking advantage of their coworkers, making them work long hours, sometimes physically abusing them, messing their schedules, last minute. It's not uncommon for people to take advantage in a higher position, and it's not as looked down upon. It's actually something that's widely accepted. If you're in a position of power, they view it as a way of almost having more benefits, more autonomy to do what you want. So that's something that's important to know. There's also a distinguishment between women and men in the culture and what they're able to do. Women are more considered to be homebound, building upon the home, taking care of children, while men are supposed to go out and make the money for the family. And so because of that, women usually don't have as many opportunities or aren't taken as seriously in the workplace, although there are possibilities for that. It's not uncommon for women to try to put on male characteristics to try to gain respect amongst their peers or for folks in the corporate world. So, in my own experiences in Korea, the two events that I wanted to point out were my enrollment in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class. Even though that's not technically a Korean thing, because I'm in Korea, it's been an opportunity to interact with Koreans at an intimate level because the class is mostly consisting of Korean-born natives. The other experience I want to talk about is actually my work with the Korean military with coming up with what you'd call a memorandum of agreement between the two organizations. So for the first one, all I can say is that for just over a month now, I've been enrolled in jiu-jitsu classes. I've had the opportunity to, you name it, bleed, sweat, and not cry, but just about everything under the sun with these Koreans. Being able to see them and how they have such a high level of respect for each other, how they show eagerness and willingness to learn new things, and just how kind they are as they're patient and wanting you to learn. Even for myself, being a brand new white belt, it'd be easy for the black belt to just stomp me as soon as I get onto the mat, but even though he does, it's always in a way that's, I can tell that he really cares and wants me to learn. In terms of the group that I worked with, that was not as fun of an experience because the Koreans I worked with weren't focused on the things that I thought they would be. I would come with proposals for security measures and new policies I wanted to change, where they were focused on more surface level things like finding a new spot for a general or giving someone base access so they can go to the golf course. And so I found that a very big point of frustration as I was working with them. But that interaction was over the course of about a month and involved phone calls, email traffic, and in-person meetings as well. So some of the key takeaways I took from both events, trying to tie it all together, is just a level of intimacy that South Koreans have. I mentioned how privacy is important amongst Koreans, but once you break through that barrier and you've established a relationship, Koreans are actually very intimate, very smiley, they're actually very physical, and they're touching when they're close. They actually get close in their face too. Those boundaries kind of go out the window once you break past the initial barriers, if you will. I also realized how focused South Koreans are. Koreans are very focused on what they want, what their desires are. If they have an objective they need to learn, they just go for it and they don't stop until they succeed in that thing or get what they want. Lastly is just the importance of body language to Koreans. Showing respect, bowing. You can tell who the person of the most respect and honor is in the room just by the way that people treat and act around that person. So body language is something that is very close and dear to them and can say a lot about who you are in a social setting. So now I'll be talking about the interviews I had with the organization and the individual. So for the organization interview, I researched or looked into and interviewed someone from the organization known as Word of Life. And now what the purposes of Word of Life is to bare bones is to bring the gospel to the youth of Korea. That's through training staff members, churches, programs to be able to teach them not just English, because that's a minor thing, but bring them the gospel, bring them hope. And so they do that through offering lots of services such as, like I mentioned, English ministries, after school programs, arts, crafts, camps. They actually offer a camp in the summer as well as the winter where students can get away from school and be able to really dive into biblical themes while having people that love and care for them walk alongside them. They're made aware of these services through social media, mostly word of mouth though. As the program has shown success, people that have experienced that success are usually the ones that pass it on to other organizations so that they can learn about this program and get involved too. I would say the greatest area of need or so the significant challenges that are among the organization is just simply how do I word it? Just the level of hopelessness that is amongst the Korean youth. There's a great need for emotional support systems, a great need for Koreans to feel like they're taken care of, that they're not just asked to be thrown into their books and their studies, but that someone actually cares about them. It's not just about the money that they gain or the prestige that they gain or all this honor that they're shooting for, but that someone actually cares for them at an intimate level. I've also noticed that one of the greatest needs for the organization is just being able to get the word out more. Sure, word of mouth does work, but it only goes so far, and so the organization only has a small footprint within the Korean Peninsula. When it comes to social justice, actually, it's not as big of a thing here in Korea, at least not openly where you'd call it social justice. Obviously, they're concerned on equality and the rights of individuals, but you don't really hear about social justice programs or social justice organizations that are rising and trying to advocate for others. I just wanted to leave you with this as we come out of the organizational interview. This was something that was said by Jay Moore, which is a pseudonym for the person that I interviewed, but he said the number one cause of death amongst teenagers in South Korea is suicide. That is why it is so important to bring something to the youth that gives lasting hope. And so there's lots of youth out here in Korea that don't have that hope. They feel like they're stuck and they can't talk to anybody. And so that's why it's so important to bring the gospel and so important to have an organization like Word of Life to bring that to them. So for the individual interview, I interviewed M. Kim, and she's actually from the Cheongju area. She's a big person into traveling. She actually grew up with lots of desires and perspectives to travel the world. Her parents wanted her to get her doctorate, like most Korean parents, and so she studied very hard all throughout her younger life. Unfortunately, she did not do very well in the important Korean exams that are held, and so she ended up becoming a teacher. And now she's a mother of one. She has a husband and works as a teacher continually now. Some of the key cultural events and interactions that she had growing up, mostly through school, Korea is highlighted as a very prosperous and a well-to-do nation. They are talked about in a sense that they are over certain nations that are impoverished. And what Kim told me was that a lot of these other nations aren't taken seriously or not talked about highly in school if they're not seen as the same level as Korea. But she considers herself an outlier in her experiences because she traveled so much that she interacted with a lot of cultures, and so it wasn't as foreign to her to speak with others and work with others. But through her experiences, I learned that education is very important to Koreans. Her emotional reaction throughout the time was that she was very smiley, mostly. She was very happy to share her experiences with me, but unfortunately, when she talked about how she didn't do well on her exams, I could tell that that was something that was hurtful for her, because I could tell that she wanted to please her parents, and that might still be a rift to this day, I don't know. But beside that, she really had a good attitude throughout the time. The last thing, for the added understanding of the culture, I really understood how important education is. She was telling me how the class hours, or at least for school, is usually from 7 in the morning, even earlier sometimes, and goes all the way to 11 at night. And so it's not uncommon for Koreans to work all day as they're going through the schooling system. And that just really made me understand just how hardworking Koreans are and the expectations that are on them. So now I'll be going over my summary of experiences, a little bit of discussion, and application and counseling. So, bottom line, I learned that interview or research only goes so far. Digging into current events only goes so far until you interact with the actual culture that you have in mind and hear their stories. It's just not the same. So of course you can learn a lot, but I would encourage anybody to dive into a culture if they really want to know it, not just do research on it. They should go hand in hand. Some surprising information I learned from my experiences was that there's a great need for global ministries, especially in the Christian world, to aid foreign countries, to help to bring the gospel, because not a lot of people are focused on that. That's not necessarily a surprising thing, but it became very apparent to me that there are many communities out in the world that just aren't aware of the gospel. And so ministries like Word of Life need continued support. It's also surprising just how much hopelessness there is in Korean youth. You know, you hear about suicide rates amongst adults, but to hear that amongst teenagers, or, you know, a sense of dread in such a young age, it's just a really sad thing to hear. Personally, I was impacted in a lot of ways. I came from it with immense respect for Koreans and all the hard work that they put in and the ways that they commit themselves to their goals. And then again, just came away just knowing that there's a lot of people out there that just need support and that need support systems. They may feel like they don't have that. Generally though, I feel like I gained a new perspective. I learned that you shouldn't assume that someone understands you. You have to try to bridge that gap and find ways to communicate effectively. You also want to avoid stereotypes. There might be a bit of truth in there, but it's not always accurate. So just be aware of that. And then I understood or learned just how rich and deep certain cultures can be. Really, there's a lot of cultures that you might only know at a surface level, but it's on us to dive in there and try to learn more about them. In terms of counseling, I learned you got to be humble. You have to know that you don't know everything and that it's okay. And so with that, you need to be humble to admit your own biases, admit your own shortfalls, and go into experiencing another culture with an open mind, with open eyes, and be willing to just learn. The second way that I think a lot of my experiences tied to counseling is just the importance of finding ways to seek common ground. Sure, there's a lot of things that make us as humans different, cultures different, but there is a lot of common ground that you can find between certain communities, and I think that's really important. Last thing is, or one of the last things is just don't assume. Don't assume you know something just because you've heard about it. That goes back into the stereotype thing. Don't assume that just because you've seen something on TV or you've had a bad interaction with someone from a certain culture that sums it up. Again, try to ask things. Excuse me, try to ask things as a counselor. Try to seek ways in which you can bridge that gap. Understand that everybody has a story. Everybody has a story that they need to tell. And it's up to us as counselors to dive in and try to understand those stories. Try to find ways that we can make those stories important for that person, make them feel heard. And then lastly, communication. It's so important that you communicate, learn how to effectively communicate. Body language, mannerism, facial expression, what you say really does matter in the counseling relationship. And so if you put all these things together, I think you have a really good shot at doing well as a counselor when it comes to counseling others from different cultures. So that concludes my presentation today. Here's a few of the references that I used throughout my presentation. And overall, I'm coming away from this experience having learned a lot, and I hope you have too. Thank you for your time.